Good afternoon. I'm Heather Hayes, Associate Dean for Strategic and Student Affairs. I'm also an alum from the class of 1995. Thank you for joining our Alumni Town Hall. Today, our topic is the impact of COVID-19 and what it has meant for the school and also law schools and higher education generally. Just a few housekeeping tips before we start. First, as this is a webinar, you can see and hear us, but we can't see or hear you. Next, you're welcome to use the Q&A function to ask questions. I know we received a number of questions in advance. This feature is found at the tools at the bottom of your screen. Please keep in mind that this is being recorded. We will email out the recording after the session. As for our agenda, we're going to start with some introductory remarks. Then I'll move quickly to the questions surrounding the impact of COVID-19 on the school. We will then look to answer further questions that we've received from the audience, assuming time permits. I am so pleased to have Dean Vincent Rougeau with us. As a member of this alumni community, it's personally reassuring to have the law school led through this crisis by someone whose experience and judgment is valued both locally and nationally. Now entering his 10th academic year with BC Law, Dean Rougeau is the most senior of all the Massachusetts Law School deans. He's been a consistent leader in our Boston Bar Association and also a national leader in legal education, having held executive committee roles in the American Bar Association and, most notably, his current role as president-elect of the Association of American Law Schools. Dean Rougeau, thank you for joining us today.
Well, thank you so much, Heather, and good afternoon, everyone. It is really my pleasure to be with you this afternoon, and I'd like to welcome you to our webinar. And I'd like to take a moment to begin just by acknowledging how this pandemic has been such a transformative event for all of us, and a difficult one for so many of us. And for those of you who are part of the BC Law community, or those of you who are considering joining this community who have been suffering because of this pandemic, I want to extend my sympathies and let you know that I'm thinking of you. I know some of you may have lost employment. Some of you may have been dealing with illness in your families, or you yourself may have been ill. Some of you may be suffering in other ways, and it's a difficult time, and we want to use this time as a community to come together and to support one another. And in particular, to our alumni who are out there, I want to let you know that there are resources here at BC Law that are available to you, so don't hesitate to reach out to us, particularly those of you who might have professional needs. The Career Services Office is here for you as well. It will be great to have a chance to talk to you a little bit more today about what we're facing and what we'll be doing. And as I said, I'm really happy to be with you this afternoon.
Thank you, Dean Rougeau. I know we are only talking about a matter of months that have passed, and that's kind of hard to believe, but so much has happened in that time. I was hoping that you could bring us back to when the crisis hit and give us a sense of what BC's response was and the timing.
Sure. Yeah, we had some indication by the end of February that there was a strong possibility that we might have to move to online learning. We saw some of the other schools in the area, notably Harvard and MIT, move rather quickly to that at the end of February or by the 1st of March. So we took that time, I took that time to alert the faculty to the potential impact of COVID-19 on our teaching and on our ability to be in place on campus. And we had a spring break coming up. And so when the students left for spring break in the beginning of March, we'd use that time here to prepare. So the faculty did what they could to ramp up their capacity for remote instruction. We put together working groups and committees to help the faculty do that. We used the resources available here on campus. And when we returned from break, Father Leahy did announce that the undergraduate students would have to move off of the campus around by March 15th or so, and on March 19th, the university would move to an online learning platform. So we had some time, but of course, nobody was truly prepared for what this was going to mean for the work that we'd be doing for the rest of the semester. But given all the work that we had done, given our ability to have alerted the students, we were ready. And we had our first Zoom faculty meeting on March 16th. And I think, the silver lining in all this was, our faculty now, since really the beginning of March, has been working hard to become comfortable with a lot of technology that will probably become a permanent part of our teaching and learning in the years ahead.
I think silver linings are important to all of us these days to keep those front of mind. So in thinking about all that it must have taken to remove to remote instruction, what were the major decisions that the law school specifically had to make to implement that?
Well, I think the biggest issue we faced right away was how would we handle grading? Switching in mid-course to a completely different learning environment by itself, without any real significant planning. I mean, we did plan, but we didn't have significant time to make the kind of change that we were making. Really suggested that a lot of our assumptions about how we would assess students and what would be appropriate ways to do that really had to be, re-examined. So I was part of a lot of conversations around the country with other deans about, how we would deal with this. And we were one of the first schools to make the decision on March 18th that we would be a mandatory pass-fail school for the spring semester. And when I last checked, now there are, I think, over 100 law schools ultimately made that decision. And I think most of us have agreed around the country that that was the most appropriate way to handle the disruption that COVID-19 brought to our academic programs. We also announced that all the exams would be take-home, online and open book, and we allowed students to have a 72-hour window in which to take their exams during the exam period. So that accounted for the fact that students were in different time zones or were in different situations in terms of where they had to return when they left campus. So we did our best to accommodate that. But I think the pass-fail grading was just an acknowledgement of the reality that a lot of the things that we would ordinarily be able to do in terms of assessing students would not be possible or appropriate given the pandemic.
Now, I know that from having lived this, that was a hot topic, to say the least. So I know many on this call would appreciate sort of what were the factors and the rationale, and why did you ultimately reach that decision to adopt mandatory pass-fail?
Yeah, it was not an easy decision, and it was a disappointing change for a lot of students. Every student goes into their new academic year with the hopes, I would assume, and I would also hope that they're going to do their best, and they're looking forward to that opportunity to showcase their best possible work. Some students maybe had a disappointing first semester and wanted to use the second semester to improve. Other students had been doing really, really well, and we're going to have an opportunity to maybe do even better. There were all kinds of reasons why, not having the ability to earn grades was a real disappointment. And there was a particularly vocal, I'd say, probably a minority of students, but not a small minority of students who were, very, very vocal about the fact that they thought this was not a good thing. We made the decision in the context of recognizing that this is a global pandemic, and the world as we had known it was going to be changing dramatically. And there were a lot of unknowns that, the students and we ourselves were not in a position to understand at that time, but knew that they were coming. We knew that people would fall ill. We knew that we were already starting to see severe economic consequences. We knew that many of our students would be returning to circumstances back in their with their families or in different parts of the country that were going to be very difficult. Some of our students would be returning to economic and dislocations. Perhaps they had left circumstances where they weren't in a position to have the kinds of resources we provide here at BC Law, internet, library, etc. So with all of that disruption, it did not seem appropriate to try to impose grading curves on the students in terms of trying to evaluate them. And I haven't even mentioned the kinds of things that faculty members themselves were facing in their own homes and in their own lives. Childcare issues, parents who were elderly and ill, two working spouses, the world was completely disrupted, and it just did not seem like trying to maintain our traditional grading policy under those circumstances was appropriate. We also, and once we made that decision, having heard, about people who disagreed, we then started to hear from a lot of people who appreciated the change. In particular, we got a very eloquent letter from the student affinity groups with the Lahanas groups, who said that our having made that decision was particularly important to a lot of the members of those groups who are often in situations where they don't have all the resources that they need when they leave campus, and being able to return home or to continue with their learning without the burden of trying to figure out how they were going to maximize their grades was really, really important to them. And we heard from lots of people who had personal situations that could have been predicted because of the nature of a global pandemic, but no one knew upon whom they would fall, who said, I didn't realize at the time you made this decision that I might be in a position where I would really not want to have to be worrying about grades. And as I returned home, I found that members of my family had lost their jobs and they needed me in other ways, or a member of my family had fallen ill and I needed to be available. So all of those reasons, I think, made us believe that this was the best decision to make at the time. And quite frankly, that's, I'm sure, why most of the law schools in the country made the same choice.
And I know too that for those alums who are on the call, and maybe for some incoming students who are listening, one thing that law schools had to keep in mind was that we have a strict grading curve, and so where the University of BC was able to do optional pass-fail. It's the grading curve was another factor that we had to consider, and it seemed like you said, we came out to the right decision. It was the majority decision for most law schools, and we saw a lot of student support at the time and then after. Now, we definitely heard from a lot of students, and there are a lot of opinions. And I know that we have done a number of town halls with our students. We have heard about how stressful it has been for them. I was hoping that maybe we could shift to some of the things that they have been experiencing.
Yeah, well, we know that the students were under a lot of stress for all kinds of reasons. I talked about some of the personal reasons, but there are also the professional reasons. One of the reasons grades are so sensitive is because they're an important tool in terms of securing employment. And we know, and in speaking to students, that there was a lot of anxiety putting grades to the side around just what was going to happen to the job market. We started this semester with one of the best job markets we have seen in years. And we, I think, had a placement, we had placement success with our students that was just, outstanding. We were like hitting it out of the park in terms of placing our students, and suddenly the rug was pulled out from under all of that. So we now are entering this very uncertain environment about jobs. And as many of the alumni here are aware, we reached out to many of you, to all of you actually, to seek your help. And when the Career Services Office did that, we immediately heard from 30 alumni just that day that we put out the message that we were trying to get help for our students who were facing uncertain job prospects, offering mentorship and internships. But I think everyone realized that something fundamental had changed, and we needed to come together as a community to support our students who were going to be entering into the wilderness, as it were, in terms of the job market. And there were no guarantees we could offer, but we had to be proactive in terms of putting into place the kinds of resources that we know from previous experiences with recessions, for instance, can be useful in times of uncertainty.
Yes, and I just want to echo the experience that the school has with prior recessions. I know for me, I was at WilmerHale in recruiting at the time of the prior recession, and so I have intimate knowledge about different approaches that firms can take and how to work with firms through these times in a successful manner. So let's start there. What do we know now about the status of summer programs and internships for current students?
Yeah, well, everything has been affected in some way. We're seeing, for instance, with internships and summer associate programs, most of those are being switched to remote or shortened. Some firms are bypassing them altogether. For their second year students, for instance, they're just saying, look, we're not going to have a summer program, but you'll have a job when you finish law school. And I think one sort of bright light in all this is, most of we haven't seen a whole lot of things being outright canceled. There are delays, there are modifications, there are postponements, but, so far, at least for the second years, I think cancellations have been relatively modest. Maybe more so for the first years. More first year opportunities probably have, if they haven't been canceled, maybe they've dried up a bit. But that's, in the hierarchy of student needs, I suppose it's probably particularly important that the second and third year opportunities are secured. Another thing we've seen is, and this is a little harder for us to manage, but we have to stay on top of it. Normally what we would see in the spring is that a lot of students who weren't working in the firm space would be looking and securing the opportunities in public interest, in other areas, smaller and mid-sized firms, business. And so, that whole opportunity for that kind of recruitment was sort of, eliminated by the pandemic, which is not to say that the jobs aren't there anymore or that the help is no longer needed. It's just that the vehicle for engaging the students isn't here. So something we've thought about, and what we're going to be doing this summer is we want to make sure that we create opportunities for students to continue in their skills building, regardless. If they're not able to secure a position, say a situation a lot of 1Ls face, we've put some programs in place that I'm really excited about. So the legal clinics have created a COVID-19 legal services project, which will allow a group of students to do clinical work over the summer to build skills in that context. The faculty, the teaching and research faculty are doing an EAGLE Legal Scholars Program, which allows students to do research work with faculty members on a project the faculty member is working on, as well as on a project they themselves want to put together. We've also pushed hard with the university to make sure that we had research assistants positions funded this year. All schools are facing financial difficulties, but we thought it was critical that we continue to support the faculty's research activity and the participation of students in that activity, because that's an important way of training and learning. And that's core to our mission. So we want to be able to bring students into that, particularly now when jobs outside of, in the commercial market and jobs in the private sector and the public sector are much more difficult to secure.
I also think that it's a great opportunity for that sort of one-on-one relationship building that is so important between students and faculty members. So, it's about the skill building, but it's also the relationships.
Absolutely.
So I have to ask, so what about OCI? Many people want to know, what are we doing?
Yeah, well, OCI is really important. I mean, that's a big part of how we place our students on campus interviewing. And there was a lot of discussion as the pandemic sort of progressed. Well, what's going to happen with OCI? It's typically done in late July, early August. And that had been a big change over the years, from it having been done. I think I remember at one point it was done in October, and it's steadily moved forward. But it was clear that we weren't going to be able to do OCI in the summertime this year. And again, a lot of law schools around the country started talking about, what would be the most appropriate way to handle OCI going forward. And in this instance, we needed to really rely on sort of the leadership schools to make some decisions, because they drive a lot of the scheduling for larger firms in terms of when they visit law schools in particular cities. So fortunately, we saw some relatively early movement by places like Harvard and Georgetown and Columbia to OCI in January. Shortly thereafter, there was a more general movement to OCI in January. And for us here in the Boston area, Harvard making that move was particularly critical. So we will do our OCI in January. And I think the benefit of this, apart from, not trying to do OCI in the midst of trying to bring students back to campus or not, depending on what happens in the summer, we'll probably be talking more about that. But because we went to a pass-fail system in the spring semester, what having OCI in January will do is it will allow students to have a second set of grades from the fall semester that they can present as part of their applications for employment with the bigger firms. It will allow the firms to have a much better idea of what their economic circumstances are and their hiring needs are. Because again, imagining firms trying to hire in the summer without any real sense of where things are headed or what's going on with their clients would not have been ideal, and would probably have meant that they wouldn't have hired. But by waiting until January, I think there's a strong possibility that firms will have a much clearer idea of their hiring needs. And frankly, what I'm hearing from a lot of firms is that there is work. They know that they're going to have needs. They just aren't exactly sure of the context and the structures that they'll be operating under, and whether or not their clients will be in a position to hire them for particular types of work. So January, we should have a better idea of that, and we're hoping we'll have a robust OCI at that time. We still have logistics to work through to make that happen. There are a lot of things we have no control over in terms of the public health situation that we'll have to also account for. But we are going to plan networking and other activities for our students in the fall so that they're ready to hit the ground running in January when OCI is up and running again.
Thank you. And I know too, something to keep in mind is that OCI is one program, and we have a handful of other sort of fairly big programs that we do, whether it's the government public interest job fairs. We have two. We have a business interview program. We have a small and mid-sized firm program. So there's going to be a lot of logistics to organize, and I'm sure that there'll be some measure of either social distancing interviews or virtual interviews, but we will make it work. So I'm going to switch a little bit from our 1Ls and 2Ls and now think about our 3Ls. I'm sure everyone can appreciate that they are the hardest hit, our class of 2020. Can you share a little bit about what it's been like for them?
Yeah, as it is for graduates everywhere, this has been a really sad and difficult time for our 3Ls. This would have been their graduation week. Their degrees were conferred on Monday officially by the university, and typically that would have been the big university graduation, and we would have had our law school ceremony this Friday. So I think the loss is really hitting home this week, although we're doing our best to provide other ways to celebrate virtually throughout this week. But anyone who has a family member or a loved one or a friend who is a senior in high school or a senior in college or finishing a program where there would have been a commencement knows that it's really a big loss. And in particular, people were dispersed before they really had adequate time to say goodbye, to sort of part in a way that gave closure to what had been a 3-year relationship of members in the class. So all of that is really difficult. So We're working with the university on the possibility of an in-person ceremony of some sort in October. The university has committed to trying to do that if that's possible, and of course that's the big if it's possible. But we're going to, put whatever plans we can put into place now for that. And if that can happen, that will be great, because people will have recently taken the bar. The bar is being offered in different times this year, July, early September, late September. So most people will be through that, and so it would be a nice time to take that moment to celebrate. So fingers crossed we will be able to do that. The LSA is also trying to hold their black and white ball at that same time, that we would have the in-person ceremony if we can do that there. So we're staying optimistic and positive about the things we'll be able to do in the future, but in the meantime, we're doing what we can online.
Yeah, so lots of contingency planning. So you started to mention the bar exam, and I would say that, other than the just quick dispersion and not having commencement now, I would say that the bar exam is the major issue for our graduates. Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, absolutely. This has been, for me as a dean, one of the most interesting points of engagement I've had with my fellow deans around the country. The concern that we've all shared about our graduates being able to take the bar has, of course, been universal and has been dramatic, because we saw announcements from various states that were totally, disconnected from other states, that were, done in various contexts that weren't necessarily the same in every part of the country. We saw some states that were making decisions about the bar without talking to the deans, other states that brought the deans in very carefully, and it was stressful. The students were getting information from all kinds of places, and it was very difficult for us to coordinate, you know, what information they were getting, but also to let the bar examiners know, and the state Supreme Courts, which are generally in charge of administering the bar in each state, that they may have made some missteps in terms of how they were rolling out their bar planning. Over time, things got better. The deans organized, and we were in a position, fortunately here in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, to have a good relationship with our bar examiners, and we're able to be in conversation with them as they rolled out various scenarios. So here in Massachusetts, the bar will be held September 30th and October 1st. And something to remember is that a state that is administering the uniform bar exam can only do it on dates set by the National Bar Examiners, the board of bar examiners nationally. So there are only 3 dates that's allowed to be held and that will count as the July administration of the bar. But of course, for all of us, the big question was, well, what happens if that administration cannot happen because of public health issues? How will you social distance people for the bar exam? All the same questions that, are being faced by organizations around the world, are faced by those of us trying to administer the bar exam. So Massachusetts made the decision to, revert to a state-specific exam, in terms of the exam would only allow the person to be admitted to the state of Massachusetts, that would be held online should they not be able to administer the uniform bar exam on the dates that I mentioned. Again, that was done in consultation with the deans, and we talked about a lot of different ways of dealing with the fact that our 3Ls would be graduating into a lot of uncertainty. Some states have decided to do things that are more aggressive, like offering diploma privileges of various types that allow them to work without having passed the bar. But, and that will be an ongoing conversation. We also have a lot of students here at BC who take the New York bar. That's probably 25% of our class, sometimes 30% of the class take the New York bar. And New York, just to show you how these things happen, decided to move their bar, but then decided to ration the seating. Once they realized how difficult it would be, they normally have 10,000 people who take their July bar, which, the rationing principles they were using were primarily, the seats would be reserved primarily for students who are graduating from law schools in the state of New York. which meant for our students, they would not be prioritized, and for a lot of other students around the country. You know, Massachusetts also made a decision to follow that in terms of rationing seats here if they need to. So, you know, we will do our, in that case, our students will be prioritized. But these are the kinds of problems we've had to navigate as deans in very, you know, in real time with short deadlines, with huge consequences for the people involved. And so it's been hard, but I'm really pleased that here at BC Now we have a new director of academic success programs, Nina Farber, who has been meeting individually with students and trying to keep on top of all of this as it happens. She and I feed her information and she gets it to the students. And we're also trying to create webinars and other ways of making sure the students know what's happening around the country, because BC is a national school at the end of the day. You know, yes, a lot of people take the bar in Massachusetts and New York, but a lot of people take the bar in other places, California, you know, Pennsylvania. We want to make sure that we're getting the information the students need so that they can get certified and licensed somewhere and get to work.
Right, and just to get a sense, I mean, we're a national school, so I think Nina's sort of FAQs of states is essentially almost every state that offers the bar exam. So staying on top of that has been a challenge, but we are so thankful for Nina, for our bar committee. The faculty on that committee are doing a fabulous job, and also for the bar prep company representatives that have been working very closely with us. So graduation, the bar exam, you know, what's next is post-grad jobs for our recent graduates. Could you, shed some light on what you see happening on that front?
Yeah, so fortunately, so far, we're not seeing a lot of job losses, and a majority of our students have secured jobs, postgraduate jobs, pre-COVID. So a lot of that work was already done, and those jobs seem to be staying in place. There probably are going to be some delays. I noticed one of the big New York firms is delaying their new hires till January. There'll probably be more announcements like that. I guess something I mentioned earlier is that for other types of employment outside of big firms in particular, a lot of times the offers are extended around in the spring or sometimes really right after graduation. Excuse me. So, smaller sized employers, public interest employers, even some large firms, and some 3Ls don't secure their jobs until later in the spring. So those are the people obviously who are in the midst of their job search, who are now in a really difficult position. They're in limbo about what the market will be and whether or not people will actually hire. And our career services office is working individually with those folks. We have a deep bench when it comes to the experience of, difficult hiring environments. So no, we've never seen anything exactly like this. We've never been through a pandemic, but some of the impacts of this pandemic are things that we are familiar with in terms of the economic challenges that come about, and in terms of the ways it affects hiring in the legal profession. So the key here is it really takes the entire community working together to kind of carry our remaining graduates who are still looking for jobs, to the finish line. So that's why we do the outreach to those of you who are our alums, who are in positions to know of opportunities or to offer mentoring or to provide internships or anything that we can do to kind of keep people moving forward. And, the faculty and staff and all of us are trying to counsel and use our networks. One bright spot is clerkships. Courts are still hiring. So this has been an opportunity for some people who might not have considered working for a judge to maybe do that. And so, we're trying to make sure that every opportunity is out there and available for students to consider so that we can get them moving in terms of their professional life.
That's right. And in some sense, there's usually this pause anyway during the bar prep study time. So we anticipate that we continue to work with our graduates through the bar and after the bar, and we will do that this time as well.
Exactly.
We know that this crisis is a public health crisis, but it also has significant financial ramifications. So what types of support on that front has the law school offered to its students?
Yes, I was really pleased that we were able, shortly after the crisis hit, I mean, if I kind of use the date that we moved to online instruction as a sort of marker, within a few weeks, we were able to pull together a committee and a fund for emergencies. So the law school now has a law school student emergency fund to respond to particular hardships that students are facing as a result of this crisis. And we funded this in part with funds from the law school budget, and also through a grant, a $25,000 grant from the Access Lex, from Access Lex. So we have already awarded $32,000 in grants and support, and these grants have covered things like emergency airline expenses, tech expenses. As I mentioned, some students are going back to situations where they don't have what they need in terms of technological support. So we've been able to help with that. Unanticipated childcare costs, living expenses that have come as a result of maybe being not being in a position to remain in an apartment. There are all kinds of things that are happening to people because of this pandemic that are truly destabilizing and make it really difficult to learn, and make it really difficult to do anything if you can't sort of provide for certain basic needs. So I'm really pleased we've been able to do that. And in addition to that, we had already begun a fundraising campaign launched by Professor Bob Bloom, who very generously seeded a fund through a personal gift, an emergency fund that would be an endowed fund. So our hope is the fund I just described is kind of in the moment for the COVID emergency now. But what we really want is an endowed fund that over the long term will always be in a position to provide our students in need with emergency financial support for all kinds of reasons that will happen every year and under any circumstance. So that's been a great development. And I think the community in general has been working really hard, the faculty in particular, to figure out ways to stay connected to students during this time. Informally outside of the classes, and more formally through panels and webinars. We have tried to do a lot to make sure that we're offering support in terms of mental health and wellness. We have regular meditation sessions. We have regular touch points for students who, want to kind of just unwind and sort of decompress. We've tried to host town halls to, hear what students are concerned about, to address issues that have arisen. We did one for the third years around the bar, for instance. I mean, that raised a lot of anxiety, and I think an opportunity to come together to make sure that they understood, what we knew and what we were able to control and what we weren't able to control was really important. We had our wellness week in April that we always have. And so, we're making sure that we're shifting to the new realities, but retaining the things that are really, really important to make sure this community is a community of meaningful support for everyone. And it's addressing the new realities that we're facing because of the pandemic.
Yeah, I was particularly impressed with all the creativity that went on between the student wellness group and our academic and student services group. There was online virtual yoga going on. There was, the meditations going on, even a paint night. I mean, it really, again, a little bit of a silver lining is how much sort of thought and creativity people have been putting into staying connected and together as a community.
Absolutely.
So we've been spending our time talking about our current students, and I thought it might be time to shift to the admissions front. And I know many people had questions about that. So how do enrollments look for the class of 2023?
Yes, in this world of all this uncertainty and all kinds of drama for so many different reasons, it's exciting to be able to report that our admissions look great. Um, the we are bringing in an exceptionally talented and qualified class. Our second deposit deadline was this week, and the deposits are very strong. And I think it's really important to call out the extraordinary work of our admissions team in this environment. Nationally, admissions to law school applications to law school were down. But at BC this year, we saw an 8% increase in applications. So, we went into this kind of new normal in an extraordinarily strong position with a lot of excitement around BC law. And we are doing everything possible we can to stay connected with our admitted students. We had our one of our admitted students day end of February, but our big one, normally the largest one, which would have been a month later in March, was canceled, of course. But we did it virtually, and I think we got a great response. We're doing panels. We have informal faculty connects, alumni connects. We are blogging. We're doing a lot that I hope to those of you out there. I know there's some potential 2023 grads in the audience. We want to stay as connected with you as we possibly can. And I really want to pause here and thank all the alumni who have been so helpful in this process. I mean, your work around the country helping us remain connected with students is critical in our enrollment and recruitment of students, and it means so much to us. So yes, the news is good, and we will face this uncertainty, I hope, with a strong entering class, and we're all really excited to welcome them.
I am as well. I can't wait. So let's think about the university as, I know that undergraduate enrollments are particularly important. So what's been the financial impact of the crisis on the university?
Yeah, that's a really important question, and something I think, we all need to think about carefully. I'm sure you're hearing in the media about the devastating impact this crisis is having on higher education across the country and the world. But particularly here in the US, where higher education is, a sterling example of American excellence. I mean, people come from all over the world to be educated in the United States in all kinds of fields. And of course, people around the country have great pride in educational institutions in their local areas. And unfortunately, this pandemic has meant that one of the key foundations of the American undergraduate experience is in question. The residential experience of, in an intense learning environment, in close proximity to your classmates and faculty and all the other activities that we associate with undergraduate life, aren't likely to happen in ways that they happened in the past. Even for schools that will be returning, it will be a shadow of what it was. So what does that mean in terms of enrollment of freshmen at a lot of our major universities? And of course, most of these universities are concerned that a lot of freshmen may decide to wait. We just don't know. So not being able to know until probably the last minute how many freshmen will show up has had a huge impact on the finances of most major universities. And at BC, I can say that undergraduates are a huge part. The undergraduate enrollment is a huge part of the budget. This is primarily an undergraduate institution. I mean, it's a university. We have extraordinarily good graduate programs, law being a star of that. But we don't carry the university in a budgetary sense. The undergraduate school does. And so if they're suffering, we all suffer. This is a centrally administered budget. So it's important to all of us that the undergraduate enrollment remains healthy and that the undergraduate experience remains one that people are attracted to. So we're all looking closely at that enrollment, and the university is doing its best to make sure that they bring in a healthy undergraduate enrollment. We also see an impact in terms of fundraising. I mean, we're a private university, and we rely heavily on philanthropy and the generosity of our alumni out there, many of you who are in the audience. And your economic situations are in many cases very uncertain too. And it would only be normal for you to be hesitant right now, some of you, to make major commitments financially. So we're all trying to understand what this means for philanthropy, but philanthropy is an important foundation of how we support our students in terms of financial aid. So all of these uncertainties are things that we're trying to manage, and it's creating a little bit of anxiety, I would say, about the future. But I think we're all working hard to recognize, that we want to make sure that Boston College remains, a pinnacle of excellence in higher education. I know our alumni understand that. I know our donors understand that. I hope the students who are thinking about coming here understand that. The support of this community has never wavered in good times and bad. And I am fully confident that people will step up responsibly and to the best of their ability at the appropriate time. But in fairness, we have to let the situation sort of settle before we'll know all those answers.
Right. So, we would like a lot of answers, and when we're trying to sort of plan for the fall, a number of schools across the country are announcing pretty detailed plans for the fall, and they range greatly, from the California system going completely online to a number of weeks ago, Northeastern announcing they were going to be fully on campus. So can you explain a little bit about what is known now about the plan for BC and sort of the planning that will happen this summer?
Yeah. Well, I'm sure many of you are aware of the letter that Father Leahy sent out yesterday that, BC, plans to open on August 31st. But I think if you read it carefully, you'll see that there are some caveats there. That is our hope, obviously, in our case, that we will open, but and that's the hope of many institutions for some of the reasons I was just articulating. But we are really subject primarily to what Governor Baker here in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts tells us about what we can do in terms of social distancing and how many people can be in offices and on campus. And some of that guidance, when it comes, it has not yet been delivered to us, will probably make clearer what we can and cannot do and what really would be reasonable in terms of in-person learning in this particular context. We're cautiously optimistic that we'll be able to do something, but I think you have to realize that in any situation, anyone who's announced that they're going to be in person, some of you may have heard Mitch Daniels, the president of Purdue, go in some detail today on CNN about his plans to open. That still means really a vastly reduced presence of people on the campus. It still means a robust online learning platform, because in a pandemic, there will be people who will not be able to be on campus for reasons of health and wellness, because they are in a high risk group. So, because they need to be isolated, there are just many, many issues that will come up that will require online learning. So I think the best way to approach this opening question is to say, how extensive will the online learning be at a particular institution? Will it be complete, as we've heard from the California State system, or from Cambridge University in England, from McGill University in Canada, or will it be modified to some degree? And I think you'll see a range from the kinds of things you're hearing from Notre Dame and Purdue to some things you're hearing from Harvard and Stanford, which are taking more baby steps. So I think as I said, the important thing to remember is that an online learning platform is going to be essential, that social distancing will be a fact of life at any university. Many people will not be on campus, so it's going to be a very different environment, but we're all trying to make sure that whatever it is, we're going to be responsible. We're going to make sure that we are adhering to all standards of safety that are required by the jurisdictions in which we operate. We want to keep everyone safe. We want to keep everyone healthy. And we want to provide the best possible learning experience we can within those contexts.
And I know that a number of people might be happy to know about your own sort of personal medical advice that you get at home and also on the law school faculty. So maybe you can mention that when you talk about what's happening now at the law school to prepare for all these scenarios.
Yes. Well, let me first talk about my colleague, and then I'll tell you about my wife. But my colleague, our colleague, Dean Hashimoto, Professor Dean Hashimoto, is a JD, MD. We have a doctor on the faculty, a doctor whose specialty is occupational health. And he works with one of the best health systems in the country here, the Partners Health System, which runs Massachusetts General Hospital, Brigham and Women's Hospital, and a network of physician groups, one of which my wife belongs to, that had to work through all of this early on. They had to look very closely at how do you keep healthcare providers safe in the midst of a pandemic. What things do we need to have in place to bring people into the hospitals and into doctors' offices? And they've actually done a lot of that work and come up with a lot of solutions. So we here at BC Law are beneficiaries of the work that Dean Hashimoto has been doing with partners that he can bring directly to us. So we know that whatever we do here, we're going to be relying on kind of the best scientific and medical advice. And, in my personal life, my wife's a pediatrician in the Partners Group, and I've been living, with a healthcare provider who has had some close calls. I mean, my wife had to be tested early on in the pandemic because they did not have safety protocols in place when they didn't know the extent of the virus in the community, and I've watched how she has had to adapt her practice and her professional life to the reality of the pandemic. And I know we'll be bringing some of those, some of that learning into what we'll be doing on the university campus. But that's to say that, it really requires very thoughtful engagement by every member of the community to understand how to keep people safe, how to engage in person in a way that respects the reality of a virus that goes where it wants to go. And, we will always be drawing on the best possible learning we can find. We talk to people at other universities who are developing plans, and we learn from those plans. We're working closely with the Commonwealth and the other states in the region. So, I think what we will learn and whatever we do, we'll be doing it, with the best scientific knowledge we can possibly get.
Now, I also know from faculty meetings that there are groups of faculty already working on sort of online learning and some other key areas to prepare. So can you tell us a little bit about what's the difference between our shift to remote instruction that sort of happened this spring and what we're doing this summer to prepare for the fall on that front?
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, what we did in the spring was what is really called remote instruction. We just took what we would normally do and did it remotely. You do a lecture on Zoom, you're hosting small class discussions on Zoom, and that can be very effective. And in the context in which it happened, that was the best response. But online learning is a much more complex and much more involved process, and there's a lot of good learning out there about how to do it well. And our job this summer as a faculty is to, capture that learning and to integrate that learning into what we plan to do in the fall. We're fortunate to have some resources here on campus that will help us, some great teaching resources and centers of teaching excellence. But we're also doing our own work. So I've pulled together 4 working groups of faculty to work on online teaching and online instruction. And we know at a minimum, we're going to be preparing that for all courses, regardless of what happens. Another group that's working on assessment. How do you grade effectively and appropriately in a mixed online and in-person environment or an entirely online environment? Are there new models we need to be considering around assessment? What can we learn from other institutions that have had been doing more online learning for a longer period of time, but we know it's really important that we have grades in the fall, and we want to make sure those grades are fair. We have a group that's looking at logistics of how we live on campus in the context of social distancing and public health requirements, how we do scheduling, how we bring staff members back safely. So that's all ongoing. And we have a group working on faculty scholarship and engagement, community engagement. A big part of what we do as an academic institution is, our faculty are scholars and researchers. And, we don't want to lose the incredible work our faculty have done and will continue to do as scholars in the midst of these transitions. So we want to make sure that we have a group of faculty looking carefully at how we support scholarship, particularly amongst our younger faculty who are building up portfolios for their careers, how we engage other scholars around the country and the world in virtual settings and other settings. And part of my work as incoming president of the Association of American Law Schools is to serve as the leader of that learned society to make sure that we are maintaining the highest standards of excellence in scholarship and research as well. So all of these things are ways that we're working to get ready for the fall.
So the good thing is that we have time, and we've gotten some great real-time questions that have come in. So I think I'm going to transition to those now, and then try to leave us a few minutes at the end to wrap up. So a question came in about this sort of remote and online instruction. Would you consider some remote classes as part of courses on a regular basis?
Yes, absolutely. And I think most schools will going forward. I would envision that under any circumstance next semester that there will be some courses that will be fully online. And I would envision that going forward in the years ahead, we'll all be comfortable with building schedules that include online courses and in-person courses. Again, the understanding would be that we are going to become masters in providing a really effective online instruction, and that we can reap the benefits and advantages of having some courses that are not in person. And I think that will allow for all kinds of flexibility for all kinds of things. I mean, from things as mundane as snow days, right? You have online instruction now. You don't need to shut down for a snow day. People can continue their learning. So that's just one, prosaic example of the positive impact that a more robust online learning platform will provide for higher education generally.
Another question came in, and we're going to go back to the subject about the pass-fail decision. So the question is, given the hierarchical nature of our profession, how will the pass-fail decision affect hiring by big law firms that base so much of their decisions on grades?
Yeah, I mean, that's a real concern. I think there are a couple of positive indications that we're getting around that. First of all the major schools have gone to pass-fail in this semester. So every student entering the market is going to have a semester of pass-fail grades from this spring, at least in terms of the schools that most big firms will be hiring from. So everyone's on a somewhat level playing field in that respect. Obviously, there's still a hierarchy around the schools, but that's always been there. So, that's something that's sort of a part of the environment. I think because OCI is moving to January, and the fact that we're all committing pretty much, I haven't heard anyone saying otherwise, to giving students grades in the fall, that the firms will now have, grades with which they are familiar, but they'll also have an opportunity to inquire into what was going on with students during the pandemic switch. I mean, so your school went to pass-fail. How did that affect your learning? What did you think you excelled in? What did you think what was difficult? Why was it difficult? It's also giving the faculty an opportunity. We're not allowing faculty to provide grades, but we are encouraging faculty to write robust recommendations that are really substantively based for students, so that they can bring those into their interviews and into the hiring process.
Thank you. I think we're going to go back a little bit and just make sure that people have a better sense about our thought process about safety and social distancing measures that will be put into place to have an on-campus experience for our students. You know, what's going to happen inside classes? Are we going to limit the number of people in common areas and things like that?
Yeah, I'll give you some concrete examples, and that might help with this question a bit. So under the current social distancing requirements here in Massachusetts, we know that only 30% maximum of a classroom's capacity can be used. So if a classroom held 100 people, there are only going to be 30 students in that, or 30 people in that classroom. So that would be a very concrete change. You know, if a class is held in that classroom, it will have 30 people or fewer. We also know that there will be requirements that will be imposed by the Commonwealth in terms of what types of sort of sanitation measures need to be in place, frequency of cleaning, availability of hand washing or sanitizing stations, how many people can be in an office. So right now I'm in my office, as you can see, but I'm the only one here. So our office suite the Dean Suite has 5 offices, 4 offices and one, and my secretary, who has a smaller office that's open to the reception area. And we have a system now where only one of us is present in the suite each day. So that's typically the kind of thing you'll see. I mean, under the current social distancing requirements, we probably can't have more than 2 people in this suite at any one time, so that will be a feature of the future. Again, we will use the guidance that the state provides, plus we will rely on the great resources we have from people like Dean Hashimoto and from healthcare systems to make sure that, what we're putting into place is appropriate. Plexiglass barriers will probably be a feature in high traffic areas where people have to engage, like academic services, with a staff member who provides services to large numbers of people. Faculty may actually teach behind barriers, and everyone will be wearing masks. I think, there's just so much evidence right now that suggests that mask wearing is a huge help in stemming the progress of this pandemic. And I'm sure Massachusetts will be requiring mask wearing. So we will probably be wearing masks when we're in the building. So those are the kinds of specific things that will be happening. But I don't want to say too much about it because, I mean, there's still time and still guidance to come. But, I think if you're following these issues in the press, you'll get a pretty clear idea of the kinds of things we'll be doing here.
Thank you. That's very helpful. Now let's think about our future enrollment. So we have our class of 2023, and we are so excited to welcome them. How is this pandemic going to affect applications and admission to the law school for the next 2 years? Is it going to impact the LSAT requirements? I know that there's a remote offering by LSAC right now, but we'd like to hear a little bit more about what you think on that front. This is coming from a mom who, as you know, a junior in high school who has not been able to sit for a number of the SATs so far. So it's near and dear to my heart too.
Well, and I think that's a good place to start if you're looking at the trend, right? Because we're already seeing undergraduate schools. There was a small trend of undergraduate schools making SATs and ACTs optional. I think that trend will accelerate in the year or 2 ahead, because there was already a lot of concern about those tests and their validity or their potential for bias. I mean, there's clear evidence that show that a lot of those tests favor people based on income. So here's a moment now where institutions can say, well, is that something we really need? Now, the LSAT in law school is a little bit different, right? Very hierarchical profession, very much driven by the perceived value of these objective criteria for judging performance, whether or not it's true. I mean, I do want to say that the LSAT has generally been viewed as a fairly good standardized test, as standardized tests go. So it's not that the test is bad, but I guess the question becomes, are we overly reliant on the test? And I think there are a lot of deans who believe that we are. And I think this period will probably be a period of some real you know, aggressive and vibrant conversation around are the criteria we use to admit students to law school still appropriate? You know, if we want to encourage people to enter the profession, are we doing everything possible to capture the best and the brightest students? What are we doing to provide adequate academic support? I mean, there's so many questions that we were looking at that I think now have just become even more pressing in this context. And so I think there's just going to be a reevaluation of a lot of things, but how quickly that will happen, I don't know, but I feel fairly confident that you know, a lot of this is going to be coming before the ABA and to the Association of American Law Schools with renewed vigor. So we'll see.
Right. First, the National Conference of Bar Examiners, but next the ABA for sure.
Next the ABA.
Yeah. So can we switch and talk a little bit about international students? You know, what about students who may be not able, you know, to return to the U.S. and are part of our community? How might we handle that? Is the law school thinking about that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this to me is one of the most immediate and devastating losses, you know, to our academic community that has resulted from the pandemic. You know, we just know that it will be very, very difficult for many international students to return because they won't be able to get visas, for instance, or because of public health requirements in their country or requirements here for isolation. There are just so many barriers now for international students who want to return if they've left. And that's another reason why I think it's really important that we create the best possible online learning environment we can, because here's another opportunity, right? We want to be able to reach out to those students and offer them, in the interim, certainly, a way to be a part of our community virtually. And if we can do that well, and you know they want to commit to joining us, with luck, we'll be able to bring them in person in the second semester, perhaps. But we'll also learn about the types of programs that we can offer or courses that we can offer that actually do well in an online setting, and we can reach more people abroad. Some of you know that we've worked closely with the country of Uzbekistan, which is, you know, opening up to the world, but is a relatively poor country, and even in the best of times would not be in a position to send a lot of students to the US, but they're hungry for American educational opportunities. So perhaps we'll use this time to develop better ways to provide educational opportunities in countries that don't have the economic resources to send their students around the world, but would love to send them to the US. So yes, there's a big loss. You know, international students are the ones least likely to be with us in the fall, but there's also an opportunity, and we're doing a lot right now. Susan Simona Kang and Dean Judy McMurrow are staying in touch with all the students who are inquiring about our LLM program and our JDs, who are international students, to make sure that they know we will do everything possible to, you know, stay in touch with them and hopefully allow them to continue or to join us.
Right. And I think sort of what, you know, what's good to keep in mind is that, you know, we are planning classes that are going to serve a number of needs. So smaller classes where it's in person to the extent that's possible, but would still be offered online, you know. So if somebody wasn't able, whether they were sick, whether they were out of the country, they would still be able to participate in some way. And I think that the faculty is working on how to make sure that we can offer different ways of accessing our courses. So another question that has come in has to do with whether, oh, I lost my place. Oh, it took until this time. People are curious as to, you know, Father Leahy has made the decision about, you know, our intent to return to on-campus in-person instruction August 31st. And we've talked a lot about how we are planning for different ways that we can proceed under the guidelines. So is there is there a sense as to a more clear time frame when we will be able to present sort of the options of how what the courses will look like and what that will look like? I know it may be just sort of a best guess, and a lot of this has to do with what the governor decides and shares with us, but people are wondering.
Yeah, no, and that's a legitimate concern. I mean, you want to be able to plan, and you want to have some concrete understanding of what your learning will look like. We have really front loaded the activity of the uh, online learning committee, so that we will have, I hope, a pretty good idea of what the online portion of the work that we'd be doing would look like under any circumstance by early July. I mean, I think our initial view had been that we would think that the university's firm decision on what reentry will look like would probably happen midsummer. Maybe it will happen sooner, and they've given some indication of that decision. But I think in terms of more concrete planning, I would look to that like July 1st time to hear something from us. Maybe right after the 4th of July, we would have a better understanding of how we're going to organize the classes, and we'd be able to communicate that.
That's great. And I know too, I mean, for those of you who are class of 2023 coming in, yes, some of your classes are the large lecture classes, but you're also broken up into the smaller legal writing classes. And I know a lot of thought right now is going into how to make some of those large experiences smaller for you. As well. So it is something that we're working on, and know that you are thinking about that as well. And we will, as the dean said, communicate back to you in early July about our thoughts about what that might look like. I know we've run over, and I did want to get to as many questions as we could on this topic. We haven't answered every question, but I really do appreciate how engaged everyone is. I know from many years of being in career services before I was in this job that alumni always want to know how they can help. So here is my quick short list on that. Keep sending us your internships, your job postings, your pro bono opportunities or other volunteer opportunities. These mean so much, and we love hearing from you and working with you. Also, you are fabulous in engaging with our students who reach out to us, whether it's over LinkedIn, a direct email, or some other connection of being introduced. So we appreciate that, and please continue to do that with our students and also with fellow alumni, because I think that the BC alum to alum network is very strong. And, many of you know, I think of it like our own little National Guard. This is also a time to echo what Dean Rougeau said earlier, which is we are here for you. This is a career advising team that works very closely with alums. You can call the office. Yes, we're answering the phone. It's been transferred. You can make an advising appointment. You can get access to our job posting board, to the resources that we have online. So please know that you can do that and spread the word. And Dean Rougeau, I thank you so much for spending this time and for your thoughtful responses. And I wanted to leave you a few minutes to close with your remarks.
Yeah, well, thank you so much, Heather, and thanks for engaging with me in this important conversation. And thanks to all of you for joining us. To our alumni in particular, your interest in what's happening here on campus is really important and critical to us. I really appreciate your engagement with us, and I'm so thankful that so many of you came to be with us this afternoon. And again, just to echo what Heather said, I want to thank you for all that you do. She gave you some suggestions of things that you can continue to do, and of course, we want to also make sure you know how we're available to you. But I also want to make sure you realize too just how important the things we always talk about continue to be in this time of uncertainty. You know, our ability to support our students financially doesn't go away. It's only even, you know, it just becomes more important than ever. And, you know, I know these are challenging times for everyone, but I want to just remind you how challenging these times will be for our students and the work that we can do to support them through financial aid. And our primary way of doing that is through our law school fund, which 100% of that money is going to support students financially. And as we try to bring in this entering class, I know that many of them are going to be facing financial uncertainties that perhaps they did not begin the admissions process with. So we want to make sure that we can do our best to be there for them in every way we possibly can. So I just want to put a reminder out there about the law school fund and you know, anything that you can do to support that as well, in addition to all of the other amazing things that you do, will be really helpful. And you know, thanks to those of you who are admitted students, who are also on the webinar. I'm glad you had a chance to, you know, get to know us better. I hope that we've given you a sense of where we're headed as an institution and how excited we are to have you, and how excited we are about the future, because I think despite all of this uncertainty, I am not in the position to believe that this uncertainty is necessarily going to be a bad thing for us. I mean, the pandemic is a horrible thing, but what it can mean for what we can be as a community actually offers us all kinds of possibilities. And one thing I know about the BC Law community is its incredible strength and its incredible commitment to its members. And in a sense, in the face of adversity such as we're facing right now, we have a real opportunity to remind ourselves just how important our bonds of community are, and to attack the future, the problems that are presented in the future, with a new sense of vigor and a new sense of creativity. And I know we're going to do that. I know that BC Law will always be an extraordinarily interesting, exciting place to learn the law, and a great community to be a part of when you become a lawyer. So thank you for joining us, and stay safe and well.
Thank you very much.